As an occupational therapist, I used art to help develop fine motor skills in children. And during a career break, I realised that the artist's dream remained, and it was now or never. How did I develop this technique? It started off as experimentation with texture, and I was looking to find a way to create the paintings without having to worry about structure. And I started off using watercolour and Indian ink, and I thought masking was probably the best way to start. So I experimented using a colour shaper and masking fluid, and the first painting was promising, but I wasn't very happy with how thick the lines were, and the lack of control was frustrating. And I suddenly remembered I had this set of compasses from when I was a child. I was given them as a Christmas present when I was about 12, I think. Oh no, 11. And they had something called a ruling pen in, and I thought I'd get that out and had a look. Thought that might be quite good for using with masking fluid, and lo and behold it was, and it's very good. I've since found out that it's something that some art schools do recommend for using with masking fluid, but at the time it wasn't something anybody had told me about, or I hadn't really thought about it. I then suddenly thought I had all these compasses and they might make interesting shapes. So I spent a while developing circle-based abstracts, and that's really where the style developed. I started using cling film. I threw everything I could think of in ways of creating texture, but the cling film worked quite nicely, and I liked the ink because of the immediacy of the colour. Watercolour's great, but to actually get a large quantity of strong colour, you've really got to mix quite a lot to begin with, and it settles out and it's a bit annoying sometimes. So I thought I'd use acrylic inks, and I've expanded the range a bit. I started off with 8 colours, and as I discovered more colours, they built up over time. And that was really how the technique evolved. About the same time I was experimenting with the abstract, I was also thinking about architecture. Because I grew up in Middleton, and it's part of the cotton industry for many years. There were lots of cotton mills around, and a lot of them have disappeared now, and I really wanted to try and capture the ones that remained before it was too late, really. So I went around taking lots of photographs, and while I was taking these photographs, I discovered other buildings like the bridge on Corporation Street in Manchester, and I really liked this contemporary architecture and started taking photographs of those as well. Originally I'd intended using them as collage work, but I just had this brainwave one day. How would they look if I used the technique I developed with the abstracts with the architecture? So I did a couple, and the first ones were promising. They weren't brilliant, but that was really the start, and I did a few more, and the more I did them, the more I liked them, the more I felt I was achieving something that I was really pleased with, and it's sort of snowballed since then. So this is my studio. I'll take back. And you see I've got a lot going on at the moment. I've got a very messy desk down there. And this is where I work, so I've got some work on the go here. This is the one I've been showing you. And then over here, I've got another one down here, which you can see is the same as the reference image. I've got a few more paintings up there and a little bit more over there. So this is where I work, and this is the view outside my window. There have been sheep, there aren't at the moment, and then I've got the rest of my studio here, so got some more look around like that. There you go. I find the process of painting quite meditative. I think that's why I'm drawn to patterns. I think that's why the abstracts particularly interested me to begin with. I think there's pattern in everything, even in buildings, and I'm attracted to the way architecture uses the same components but puts them together in structures that make interesting architecture. I try to include details that provide a sense of depth or capture an angle that brings that sense of wonder, of looming architecture. I remember passing the chimneys of Middleton as a child and feeling like they would topple over as you looked up at them. I particularly remember one time when, I'm not sure how we managed to do this, it's probably one of those things that we broke through a barrier or it was poorly restrained, but I can remember looking up inside one of the old mill chimneys, and it was obviously due to be demolished, so it's incredibly dangerous when I look back at it, but it's just one of those things that we did as children, but possibly wouldn't be quite so easy to do nowadays. But it's a distinct memory, and it was just one of those things that dominated my childhood. Everywhere I went I saw chimneys and cotton mills, and everything was quite black because everything was still sooty. The Clean Air Act had come in, but they hadn't really got around to cleaning the buildings. And I can remember going to school and they'd started cleaning the soot off many of the buildings in Manchester, and I suddenly started seeing all these new buildings. First of all, they'd be shrouded by these coverings, usually cloth, and you'd see the dust coming underneath when they were sanding away and whatever else they were doing behind the coverings, and all of a sudden all the scaffolding and that would come down and we'd see something spectacular that I'd not seen before, and that really, really appealed to me. Masking is an important part of the process. I need to be sure I've got the structure right, and I tend to work now from the photographs directly because they give me a clearer idea, and I've arranged the composition so it allows me to be far more expressive with the paint and the ink once I get started on the painting process. My first aim is really to remove all the white areas. It's quite a terrifying moment when I start painting because I've put all this work into getting the image so far, and all of a sudden I'm now going to add colour, and I never quite know what's going to happen, and I always find I'm quite nervous that I'm going to get it wrong. I never like them when I first put the paint on. I always feel this time I finally messed it up for good. But once I start applying the inks and applying them in layers, I find things start to develop, and I get more and more content with the results in the end. As I apply more ink, I find the layers evolve and build up so that you get a better image, and the more I work into it, the more I'm satisfied with how it's turning out. What art school did I attend? I didn't go to art school. I did A-level. I failed A-level. Got very discouraged, which is why I went into occupational therapy. And I enjoyed occupational therapy. It was great. I learnt a lot. I had my own private practice for a while. But somewhere in the back of my mind, there was always that thought that art was what I really wanted to do. And when it got to the stage where I was just finding occupational therapy was too much, I wasn't enjoying it as much as I'd previously done, and it was too much like a busman's holiday, having a young family and working with young children. And that was the point where I thought, nope, I'm not going to do this anymore. But I hadn't really thought about becoming an artist. That came sometime later. The original plan was just to stop, enjoy having the children while they were small, look after them, take care of their needs. Once my youngest started primary school, I was then going to possibly back into occupational therapy or something else. And during that period, I suddenly thought I really wanted to be an artist. What happened to that dream? It's now or never, and I decided I'd regret it if I didn't try. So I tried, and here I am. So what attracts me to architecture? I've always had a fascination for buildings. I used to walk past the old cotton mills in Manchester, and I can remember walking past one with my dad. Very dark building with a drop on one side by railings, so you can see the sub-basement. Dad, he was singing Manchester Rambler, and it was a big building. I think it was about 5 stories high, and because we were on the north side, it was very dark, and it was a soot-coloured building, which added to the effect. And as you walk past Times Mill, there was railings on the left-hand side, and there was a drop inside the railings, so that the sub-road level, and it was all dirty and dusty, and there was a metal fire escape outside. And I can remember wandering down there with my dad and being quite terrified of this dark building, but in the distance there was a little bit of light, as at the end of the building the sun shone through onto the opposite side. Using acrylic inks, I tend not to use the brushes. I much prefer to apply the inks directly using the eyedroppers that come with most of the inks I use. I have my favourites. I prefer the long, thin, pointy ones to the bulbous ends, but apart from that, I love the way the ink sits on the top of the paper, and sometimes it will sink in, and other times it will just stay there and form an embossed surface. do I choose my subjects? That's a tricky one. Sometimes I go out with the intention to photograph a particular building. It may be it's a commission. It may be I've just heard about this building and I really want to create a painting inspired by it. And other times I'm out and about and something catches my eye. I like to paint the invisible and the things we don't notice every day, the things we take for granted, things that aren't quite so pretty because they tend to be edited out of paintings, but actually they're part of every day, and I think it's good to include these types of things. The rubbish bin that's by the building is a part of the life of that building, and so I want to reflect that. I want to show life as it is now, not a sanitised, edited version that's perfect for history, because no period of history is perfect. There are always going to be details, there are always going to be things that are messy, and messy is part of life, and messy is how we are. So why wouldn't I include that in my paintings? This is how life is. I paint in the 21st century, so I want to paint life as it is now. I'm not really interested in hiding the details. I think it's important to show the scars that are present. I want to show the things that people don't notice. I want people to look up and look down. There's interest everywhere. It's dependent on your perspective. And I'm looking to try and find ways of using that perspective to make life more interesting, to make my paintings more interesting.
What's interesting about this one, we're used to people drawing, especially architecture, with black lines.
Yeah.
And I've never seen somebody use it in the reverse, where the white line is being used, and it works very well.
But great use of perspective and a different plane. So again, a lot for the eye to do.
Yeah.
And you think that you've seen everything you've got to see, and then suddenly you notice something else, like the reflections on the right-hand side.
Also, when you go to certain parts of London, for example, I like the way you get sort of quite nice houses dwarfed by these amazing skyscrapers.
Landscape Artist of the Year. That was an experience. I thoroughly enjoyed my day. It was a very long day. We started at 7 o'clock in the morning and we carried on until gone 7 in the evening. I think it was past 8 o'clock by the time we finally left. It wasn't something it was an experience I wanted to do. I'm glad I did it. It's not really my style. It was too restrictive. I don't mind restrictions, but when you paint architecture and you're presented with a very when you paint architecture and you're presented with a very non-architecture environment, it's very difficult to be inspired if that's not really your bag. The other problem I had was the time restriction. My paintings usually take several days, and 4 hours isn't that long. It was a good discipline though. I'm glad I did it. I have no regrets about doing it. I certainly learnt a lot. I feel more confident about being in front of a camera, and that was definitely a bonus. And it was lovely to be interviewed by Frank Skinner and to meet Joan Bakewell and to see behind the process of filming. It was something that I've never been aware of before, never had the opportunity, so it was great to actually experience it. By far and away, the best part is removing the masking fluid. The painting changes many times during the creative process, but it's that final reveal. I love the way that when you remove the masking fluid, the image comes into focus. It's like with a photograph. When you're taking a photograph with a camera, you turn the focusing ring and everything suddenly becomes very clear and precise. And there's that magical transformation in that very final stage, even though there are stages throughout the whole process where, with each phase, it changes as it goes along. And that's one reason why I like to video them, because when I video it, I capture those moments that are lost in time. The final picture will always be the final picture, but there are moments I love within each stage of the painting's development that I really want to record and keep a record of, because they're gone. It's like when I first apply the inks form a certain shape, but as time progresses, the inks will move around the watery base and I end up with something different. I always find I tend to paint at the end of the day, and I'll come back the next day and the painting has changed dramatically from what it was the night before. And it's quite a magical process, and it's a process as much as anything else that fascinates me. I've got the love of architecture, but I've also got the love of changing a white piece of paper into something that nobody else has done. I'm not trying to copy anybody else. My work is unique. I am who I am, and my work reflects that. Up to the Tantric Chapel, and here looks a lovely building. I love this building. I quite enjoy exhibitions. They're a lot of hard work to begin with, but it's always lovely to actually meet new people and to talk about the art and to share it. I believe art needs to be shared with other people to be complete. There's a certain amount of introspection while you're creating it, but then once you actually get to an exhibition or an art fair or anywhere where you can share your art with the public, it takes on a life of its own. People are often fascinated by the stories behind the pieces, but then they also bring their own insights and stories, particularly in architecture, where the buildings that inspire the paintings have a rich history of people using them, either working there or living there. In the Oxford colleges, it's a case of them actually being there as students, and student life is a very evocative, emotive time of their lives. But also workplaces have fond memories. I sold a print recently of the Lloyd's building, and the lady's father had worked there, and when he saw the print, she fed back to me that he'd been moved to tears because it was such an important building for so long in his life. Being able to inspire that kind of emotion in somebody is particularly poignant when, as was the case in this situation, the gentleman was in the early stages of dementia. But also there's happy memories as well, situations where people have met their future partners, spouses. There's so many reasons why people connect with buildings, and these are particularly the types of things I'd like to inspire people to think about. Who lived in these buildings, why they lived there, how their lives might have been carried out. All these little questions are always at the back of my mind when I'm deciding on a subject.
So that's me, Cathy Read. Where to now? Where does the journey go? When I started on this journey, I had no idea I'd be creating the type of art I'm creating now. I've realised so many dreams already, and I have plans. I have ideas for the future, for exhibitions, for paintings, if you'd like to see where I'm heading. Whatever you decide to do, thank you so much for watching so far, and I'd love to hear from you if you want to get in touch. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.